I want to point out that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I want to hope gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Energy Week with George Harvey, me, and Tom Fennell, who you already know because he sits there staring into the camera like a deer in the headlights because he's doing our engineering while he's doing everything else. He's really quite a marvel. We have Jeff with us. Jeff, what is your last name?
Dickinson.
Jeff Dickinson with us, who is expert on a remarkable wide variety of renewable energy approaches, and James Perkins, who Jeff works with and who runs a company called Little Green Hydro.
Wave to the camera, guys.
Wave to the camera, Jeff and James. We're very friendly here. I get up every morning at about 4 o'clock and start looking at headlines, and I find the best I can and post them at my website, which is geoharvey.wordpress.com.
You've had enough coffee by now.
Yes, and I also write for Green Energy Times. But the point is that I wind up having a lot of headlines, and that's what this show is about. We're sharing them. So I'm going to start on last Friday, which is the 11th of April, and I'm just going to go through these, and our guests are allowed to comment whenever they feel like it. The first item is from building.co.uk. The future of small-scale renewable power projects has been thrown into doubt by changes to European state aid rules, industry leaders have claimed. The European Commission changed its guidance on state aid for renewable energy. And I am not sure what all that means because it's very complicated. The next item is Lord Nicholas Stern, author of a landmark 2006 study on climate change, says the conclusion that global output could dive 5% to 20% without action to curb greenhouse gases was an understatement. That from the Sydney Morning Herald. And the third item for that day, last Friday, the UK has successfully lobbied, we're getting back to the EU state guidelines, to have an article containing the phrase, quote, the measure should in principle not reward investments in generation from fossil fuels, end quote, removed from the new EU state guidelines. They're allowing the countries to subsidize fossil fuels.
I was reading that, and
crazy.
I didn't think I understood it the way you just said.
Oh, really? Well, maybe people should actually go to the source.
It did not seem to be sensible.
No, it doesn't seem to be sensible at all.
But then again, why shouldn't we subsidize fossil fuels?
Why?
After all, these billionaires need more money.
Oh, well, you know. That was, by the way, from the Solar Power Portal, and that's in the April 11th edition.
You know, I'm going to just interject a second here. I got a lot of stuff set up to pull up on the screen. I'm not going to bother doing it because if I do, we're going to take away from what these guys.
Well,
have to show us.
we've got next week.
yeah, we can do that.
A lot of this stuff just hangs in there.
This looks pretty
from week to week.
interesting.
This looks interesting. Okay, now this is the item that I think is one of the two most interesting of the week, and it's very discreet. It's very simple. Eminent Bishop and Nobel Prize winner Desmond Tutu, remember him?
I
yeah,
have a picture
absolutely.
of him. I lost it.
Has called on businesses to cut ties with fossil fuels industry in the same way they did with South African companies during apartheid. This is a moral voice speaking.
That's also a practical way of doing it. Money talks.
Well, not only that, but they can save money doing it.
Yeah.
Oh, dear. Okay. No, neither of you guys has anything to say.
I mean, I think
it's
a good point. I mean, for Desmond Tutu to come out and say that, and others, there were 10, 15 years ago a real push in Thailand among certain groups of Buddhist monks to essentially force their practitioners to conserve certain force, and sort of bringing up the whole idea of forest conservation. So having religious leaders go at it from a religious aspect,
Yes.
it puts additional moral force that people can't, if they follow that religion, can't really ignore. So I think it's a very clever way to sort of start pushing from a different angle that really hasn't been approached yet
Yes.
by any of the church leaders.
Okay. The next item, oh, that, by the way, was from Blue and Green Tomorrow. The next item from Green Tech Media, we are halfway to market dominance for solar. Believe it or not. Electricity output from solar PVs is approaching 1% of the total global electric production, according to the IEA. That may not seem like much, but that 1% is actually halfway to the goal of market dominance.
Well, I had a hard time reading this one. It took me a long time to figure it out. I was counting 2, 4, 6, 8. And this guy is talking about everything doubling. So it's not 2, 4, 6, 8. It's 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64.
Yeah.
That's what's That's why we're halfway there with 1%.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Someday.
It doesn't make sense, but
looking at
the
this-
math works.
Yeah, looking at it a different way. If you want to stop dealing with just solar and deal with all renewable energy of new types other than hydro dams, basically what happens is solar power is growing so fast that it's almost half. Solar and other renewables are growing so fast that right now they may dominate this year. Because they
In
may
some
be
places they will.
worldwide, they may be 50% of the installations this year. If you combine all renewable resources
Yeah.
going in, other than the old hydro dams, and that being the case, it's easy to believe that solar power is a big deal, even at 1%, approaching 1%.
I mean, that may be the case, but I think that's sort of frighteningly misleading. In a way to say that 1% of generation worldwide is going to shift a particular market or halfway to sort of gaining something like that. I mean, in terms of solar's practicality and such, there's an awful lot of natural limitations on it, technological limitations that just will prevent it from growing beyond a certain level. And I think that there's an awful lot of flag waving and cheerleading going on right now about solar worldwide, and it is growing very fast because it's amazingly easy to put up and really fast to put up.
That's right.
And I think, and I've seen this in different places, that politicians latch onto that because it's shiny, it's new, it's modern, and it goes in so fast. So that's why we're seeing it grow. And I actually came to the conclusion fairly recently, reading all this and seeing that we're in a bubble. We're in a solar PV bubble.
Well, we might be. It might be.
So,
But
yeah,
if we
but we
are,
won't know
then
until time.
there's one of the things that I think that people who are in the renewables field have to realize. Most of them actually do, but people who are kind of at the periphery of that field, looking in, politicians and people who care they really have to understand that what we're talking about is an energy mix.
Yes.
And we have to approach that energy mix as a mix, because if we depend on one thing, it's not going to work.
Yeah, we've seen where we end up with that with oil and taking over
absolutely.
such a degree.
Yeah.
Sure.
The next item is same day from the Japan Times. A radical shift from fossil fuels to low carbon energy would slow world economic growth by only a tiny fraction every year. A new draft UN report on tackling global warming has said. That was issued on Friday. The report was actually issued on Sunday and made available to the public on Monday. And we will get into that more. That was on Saturday. On Sunday was when the IPCC report was released. This is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. I'm glad I was able to remember that.
I'm seeing this all over the net.
All over
it
the
is
place.
Popping
it's
up
not
everywhere.
going to go away. Not going to go away. And I find it interesting that Desmond Tutu's announcement was before that was released. He knew it was coming.
It was leaked a lot, though.
Yeah, it was leaked a lot. But I just think this is, we're seeing a confluence of events here. The IPCC report says greenhouse gases need to be cut by 70% before 2050 to control climate change, and the job will become harder and more expensive unless the transformation is made within 15 years. That from the Daily Mail. Now the next one, also on the IPCC report, says catastrophic climate change can be averted without sacrificing living standards, and concludes that the transformation to a world of clean energy, ditching dirty fossil fuels, is eminently affordable. This from an organization called Business Green. And that, I think, is really the crux of the issue. We have to do it, but really we're going to, ultimately, I think it's not going to be a matter of having to cut back anything. I think everything is going to be improved except for the income of people who are dependent on the fossil fuel industry. And it kind of reminds me of my ex-wife, who said there was one thing in this world she hated more than everything else, everything. And that was being told that she had to do something that she was planning on doing anyway. And in this case, it's a little easier than that, because we're being told that we have to do something that is going to save us money.
And there's a lot of good examples from industries doing that from around the world.
Oh, many.
You know, and that's sort of the approach, and I think a lot of that's missed. You know, if you go to like the cassava, the starch industry in Thailand, it's now all running self-contained. It's actually exporting clean power to the grid and saving phenomenal amount of money inside the business.
That is cool. Cassava. Now,
yeah.
What is it that they're doing?
The cassava is a root that
Yeah.
they extract the starch from, and the
Right.
starch is tapioca.
Yes.
Okay, so
eat tapioca, guys.
Eat tapioca from Thailand, and Thailand's the largest exporter of tapioca, of cassava starch in the world. It's a huge industry, hundreds of mills. These mills now have all virtually gone over to using their wastewater to make biogas to run their operations, and because the government in Thailand allowed net metering up to 10 megawatts.
Oh,
They're
wow.
now, they're very progressive and successful. They're now exporting large amounts of power back into the grid. So they've seen their waste become an energy source,
Well,
and their prices drop.
But this is so something that you see so much in the renewable world, is that the waste is a valuable resource, and that's something that I find kind of thrilling. One of the most interesting books I've ever read was a book called Garbage. And it was about the history of waste in the United States. And it harkens back to, you know, my childhood, when we were told by people who believed it that if we bought things that were consumer products that would just be thrown away, it would be good. It would be good for everybody, because it would mean higher employment. And don't worry about the fact that, you know, 100 years from now, if we do this till then, we're going to have 6 feet of waste.
I heard waste not want not.
That was also
paying
there.
attention.
That was also there. But during the 1930s, people said, well, you know, if we have
Maybe.
disposable diapers, we're going to, it means that, you know, we'll employ more people.
Yeah, we need to use less.
We need to use less. Yeah,
No doubt about
it's all about sustainability. But the world has changed. Next item, this is also on the 13th. Geologists in Ohio, for the first time, linked earthquakes to a geological formation deep under the Appalachians, in those formations, to hydraulic fracturing, leading the state to issue new permit conditions on Friday in certain areas that are among the state's strictest, and that from the Huffington Post. Now, this is an item which I find very interesting. More than 7,000 megawatts of new wind turbines are scheduled to be built by the end of next year, potentially increasing Texas wind power capacity by 60%.
Let's say that number again, just so it sinks in.
7,000 megawatts. Now, I figure that if
That's
you...
about 10 Yankees or something like that?
Well, no, because the capacity factor.
Capacity factor.
But the capacity factor of wind in Texas is approaching 50%.
Okay.
And in some isolated turbines, it's actually getting over 50%. So this 7,000 megawatts, we could call that 3,000 megawatts of continuous supply, and that would be 3 modern nuclear reactors of kind of intermediate size. And that's just going up over between now and the end of next year.
And I did read that article, and that 7,000 is more than any other. This is what they're adding
Yes,
in 1 year,
just in,
and that's more than any other state presently has.
that's right. Just Texas,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's
So
increasing.
this is growing very
Yeah.
rapidly.
Yes, the amount being installed is greater than any other state has in place. Now that's Dallas Morning News. One thing that I should point out, by the way, is the technology to transport that power exists, and in fact,
Texas, yeah.
No. Just the technology exists.
Oh, sure, yeah, yeah.
There's a company in Ayer, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah, and they will put up. They have a transmission system which is already being. Their patents are already being infringed on in China.
No surprise.
But their line loss is down around. It's down below 3% per thousand miles. So in 1986 the line loss was something like 9.5%, and the DOE said that was enough that you could transmit high voltage DC for 4,000 miles, high voltage AC for 2,500, and be cost effective.
I'm thinking 7%. So
when you-
we're in that area.
Yeah, and that's the standard of new stuff, 7% as of about 1995. But at 2.5%, it means that you could generate power anywhere in the Western Hemisphere. And if you've just got the cable, which is not going to be cheap, you could deliver it anywhere in the Western Hemisphere.
Yep.
So that power in Texas has implications for the New England grid. There's power being generated in Kansas, wind power, that's being delivered to Alabama. There's power that's going to be generated in Wyoming, as you know, that's being
Delivered to California.
San Diego, as a matter of fact, all the way
Yeah,
down to Southern
almost
California.
Mexico.
Yeah. So that's a big deal, and the fact that it can just go up over a period of months is impressive. Okay, on the 14th, negotiations between London and Dublin over cross-border trading of onshore wind power have failed, according to the Irish Energy Minister, whose name is
Rabit.
Rabit. Rabit does not sound Irish. The breakdown leaves a gigawatt-scale ambitions of various organizations unlikely to progress before 2020, if at all. That from ReNews. And next, the United States DOE's National Renewable Energy Laboratory has warned that failing to renew the production tax credit could cause the growth of the wind sector to fall from 8.7 gigawatts per year in 2008 to 2012 to between 3 and 5 gigawatts next year. Is Texas part of this country anymore?
Well, they do have their own grid.
They have their own, actually, I think they've got more than one.
Well, whatever it is,
Yeah.
it's isolated.
Yeah.
It's its own.
It is its own. Yes, that's right. Okay. Now, on the 15th, which is the day before yesterday, the Czech-run state-run power utility says it has canceled a tender to build 2 more nuclear reactors because of falling electrical prices, have made the multi-billion-dollar project less feasible. Westinghouse and a Russian consortium were bidding to build the reactors. I wonder if that was influenced by the invasion of the Crimea. But it's important to note that that was because the reason was that they stated
It's economics.
it's economics, and it was
That's what's going to drive this revolution.
yeah. After that, and this is really a kind of, it's a very interesting thing. It's one of those things that if you focus on certain things that you hit in the news that don't make sense, sometimes you can learn something from them. About 75% of New Zealand's electricity comes from renewable resources. And the government has pledged to raise that to 90% by 2025. But a senior executive from Citigroup, who was visiting New Zealand and giving a talk to a conference in Wellington, told the audience the percentage could be greater. Radio New Zealand.
It's interesting. That's interesting.
Citigroup is
Yeah.
saying that isn't
That's-
quite as well as you can do. 90%.
And here again, it's money talking.
It's money talking, absolutely. Okay, on the 16th, yesterday, the first quarter clean energy investment rose 9% from last year on surging demand for rooftop solar panels. New investment in renewable power and energy efficiency rose to $47.7 billion, up from $43.6 billion, according to Bloomberg New Energy Finance, and that from Bloomberg. Former Prime Ministers Koizumi and Hosokawa will establish an anti-nuclear power forum in May to promote research into renewable energy and support anti-nuclear candidates in elections. And that was
Now, that's quite a
from
development.
Japan Times. Well,
Yeah.
these people have been very strongly anti-nuclear
Ever since Fukushima.
ever since Fukushima. And they're, you know, it happens that the Prime Minister of Japan, whose name is Abe, is pro-nuclear because he thinks it'll be good for business. And on
So
the
this
short
is
term,
a counter to
yeah,
that.
but it's interesting because Abe has support that has nothing to do with nuclear, and the average Japanese. In fact, I've forgotten what the last polls said, but it seems to me that it was something like 80% of the Japanese were anti-nuclear. So I don't, you know, these.
That fits with what I'm reading.
Yeah.
I think that's close to it.
Okay, now here's another one, and I think this is something to note. ISO New England, which of course is supplying power in New England, reports today that the volatile natural gas market in this region pushed wholesale electric prices up by 55% last year. We're already seeing some of this in the retail level, but the real impact will likely be seen in our monthly bills next winter. That from the Boston Business Journal. That does not mean that it will have that much effect in Vermont, where we get much of our power from Hydro-Quebec.
But there's not enough pipelines for the gas in Massachusetts.
Yeah,
And that's
Yeah.
what's causing it.
Yeah,
It's not
and
that there
people
isn't
are-
any gas, it's that they can't get it where they need it.
yeah, and people are having. It's a problem because they need to add infrastructure to take care of the gas that they think is going to be coming from the fields, which may not deliver.
Going to run out by the time they get the infrastructure built.
What can you say?
I mean, that sort of points out the whole lack of infrastructure and energy delivery in this country in the last however many years. You know, the grid's fallen apart in places, the electrical grid, there's not
Yeah.
enough gas pipelines.
That's
It's been
right.
like a real sort of avoidance of putting in that infrastructure. And-
But I'll tell you something. We got a lot of free infrastructure. It's called streams and rivers.
Oh yeah, no, exactly. You know, and the wind blows and the sun shines, and
That's
the trees
right.
grow too. But
Yes,
it
that's
just
right.
sort of shows that there's been no push and no government support for industry to get into
Well,
transmission because there's not much money in transmission. You know, there's more.
There, I think there will be, though. I think
Yeah.
that's where the money is going to be.
It has to
made.
go now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it has to go now.
I think
That's
it was
right.
in this article that I read, and it hasn't been decided yet, but what it looked like to me is they're going to put a surcharge on the electrical customers so that they can build more gas pipelines.
Okay.
That doesn't make sense to me.
There's a lot of things in this world
But the
that don't make
answer,
sense.
going on to that, is it really doesn't matter because the users are going to pay for it, whether they're the gas users or the electrical users.
Oh, boy. Are they going to put a surcharge on natural gas to support electric?
I didn't read that in the article.
Yeah, I didn't think so. Okay. Now, here's another one, which I think is really interesting. California's recent revisions to Title 24 put in place ambitious performance goals. All new residential buildings must be net zero energy by
Oh,
2020.
yeah. Explain net
Whoa.
zero. Explain net
Well,
zero.
net zero means that the amount of energy you use is not greater than the amount of energy you produce.
Okay.
Or to put another way, you make more energy than you use. And there are buildings of that type already around. I saw an article about one in, maybe I wrote the article. I think I wrote it. A house in Devens, Massachusetts, where they get money from the grid, and it is more than they pay for the propane they use when they use propane.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is because you've got a house that's very well insulated, that is powered by solar panels.
But this is not only covering multi and single-family dwellings, the next step is going to cover
Yeah.
industrial.
Yes,
Office
the commercial
buildings and
buildings have to meet the same standard by 2030.
They do allow them to count storage.
They allow them to count storage.
So if
Okay.
they get batteries, that's part of
their-
the,
yeah,
the
well,
mix, which
yeah,
makes sense.
It makes sense. This is likely to have ripple effects through the whole nation's construction industry, and yes, it will have ripple effects. And there are more and more people who are saying that they want their houses to be net zero, and the fact is that there are solutions to this. That there's the passive house solution, and the passive house solution is mind-boggling. But I can tell you that I know for a fact that it works. In a passive house, the house is sufficiently well insulated, and you have to have air circulation is a big deal. You've got to make sure that you've got air coming in from inside to the inside from outside and going out, because otherwise you're going to have bad air inside. But in a passive house, the house is sufficiently well designed and insulated and so forth that the ordinary activity of human life, and if you have a big dog, the dog's life, is sufficient to power the heat for the house.
The 100-watt dog.
The 100-watt dog.
The 800 BTU
You know, you were
person.
talking about economics before,
Yeah.
and for this particular topic, I'll just say, you know, microhydro is really the only renewable technology available to the citizen today that can achieve that economically, a net zero house. Solar can't do it cost effectively, nor can wind, not without subsidies and incentives. But microhydro, because it's baseline power and cost effective, can actually do a net zero house. So, you know, that's something we would be generating power back, selling power to the grid if we could, like solar, putting solar panels on rooftops connected to the network.
Can the
We cannot do that.
You can't do that.
Not because we can't technologically,
Regulatory.
regulatory.
I know that.
Yeah, regulatory.
Because it's
Regulatory.
required in Vermont to get a CPG, a Certificate of Public Good, because the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, the feds, say, you know what, solar and wind is okay, but this thing has this word hydro. Therefore, you can't send these renewable electrons to the grid without us telling you you can do it, and you need a license and a permit, or
Which
else
costs a lot
you
of
do
money.
what we do, costs
A lot of effort.
$50,000, which is way more than a microhydro system. And as a result, sadly, we end up burning off renewable electrons from microhydro, just like they used to do with the gas wells burning, oil wells
They
burning
still do,
off the
yeah.
gas.
Now, the microhydro power that goes untapped is just power that's going untapped.
Correct.
It's just water going down a stream. And folks, stick around because you're going to hear about this, and we're going to go into that. But this is the government at work.
Or not.
Yeah, it's even worse than that, though, George. There's water energy going downstream, but in our case, we actually have a microhydro system that has fully met the demand of the house and has renewable electrons that could be shared with others on the grid. And because of regulatory, we have to just burn those.
Now, let me ask you a question, just as you're saying this, because I know I'm not going to remember this.
Okay.
Could a deal be worked out with Green Mountain Power, for example, if it were in Vermont and in the Green Mountain Power system? Would it be possible for the household owner to say, I want to hook this to the grid, and by the way, Green Mountain Power, can we sell this to you? Would that be something that would be...
It's possible. It's unlikely that would happen. With a small business, it's more likely.
Too small.
Or a municipality.
Yeah,
A small
okay.
business is more likely to do that. An
Okay.
individual house, probably not, but there's no reason it shouldn't be permitted.
Yeah, of
because if we
course.
can do it with solar panels and wind panels, the power that's generated from the microhydro system is actually pure sine, and it's better than the grid
Yeah,
power today,
yeah.
cycle-wise.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
again, just to sort of close up on that, the utility will face, the Green Mountain or whoever will face that same regulatory issue of where did that power come from. And so if it came from hydro, they've got to prove that, you know, it's properly permitted.
Okay,
So
which means that Green Mountain Power may not even be able to say, yes, I'll do, even though it's not
Yeah, and unfortunately, they can't go wink, wink, we'll take it. They've
Yeah.
got to have the
It's
paperwork
economics,
behind it,
really,
yeah.
and that's where it puts it out of the reach of the average citizen, which our technology is exactly for the citizen, not
Yeah.
for big industrial
Cost of permitting.
wind farms or
Right.
solar farms.
Right. Okay. Now, today's news, we've got 4 more items, and then we're going to get into show and tell on microhydro. And this is from the Energy Collective. When the wind blows and the sun shines in Germany, electric prices in the country plummet. Natural gas peaker plants are not needed as peaks have been erased, and they cannot compete with new renewables. But the grid still needs balancing resources like demand response. Now, it's interesting that GE got involved in exactly that situation just recently. I think it might have been today.
It's not a coincidence.
In Scotland, though.
Yeah.
In Scotland, GE is going into supplying wind farms with capacitors that can store electricity. I think we're going to see things continually changing.
There's going to be many, many changes,
Yeah.
and they're all going to be for the better.
Next, this from scoop.co.nz. The IPCC report is positive on renewables' ability to deal with carbon emissions. It addresses nuclear power as possible solution, but also underscores considerable barriers for it. The combination illustrates the conclusion that nuclear is largely irrelevant. Okay, nuclear power is irrelevant. Okay. And we will get to that in just a moment because there's an issue, there's something here that you don't know about. Came in just this morning. No, the IPCC report doesn't call for a fracking boom. That's the headline of an opinion piece that appeared in Grist today. Interpretations of the report say it endorses fracking, urging a dash for gas as a bridge to fuel to put us on a path to more renewable energy are exaggerated, lacking in content, or just plain wrong. And the final thing, and I have to thank Bill Pearson for this because he sent me this in an email. I missed it. Over the past few months, there has been a bit of a sell-off of energy stock.
Oh, that's interesting.
But the sell-off is not from just anybody.
Aha.
The sales
thick
are
plot.
being done by corporate executives. 5 of them have sold large quantities in the period of December through April. And why? Well,
I was going to ask that.
this is from an organization. You know, I forgot to write their name down. I think it's called Green Power, which has just started up in the last few months, and they're giving the reasons why nuclear power is probably not the best approach. And gentlemen, we are ready to talk about microhydro again.
Okay, great.
Okay? We've got 28 minutes before the end of the hour. So you've got...
Well,
Start
just
talking, guys.
Yeah, there you go.
start off with briefly, then I'll let Jeff do most of the detail. We'll both cover things. We're a couple of the guys with Little Green Hydro, and we've been out in the field and the market and citizens groups. In fact, I put a plug in for next Wednesday the 30th, or is it 2 weeks?
Week after.
Town energy committees this isn't, I guess Brattleboro is considered Upper Valley, isn't it? Sort
No,
of, not
I
really.
don't know.
Not really. Where does the demarcation
I don't know.
take
Around
place? Like
Springfield.
Springfield,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I don't
there's
know.
a Upper Valley Energy Roundtable taking place on April 30th in the White River Junction Bisbee Senior Center at 5:30 to 9:30. And town energy committees, folks from town energy committees are coming and actually will be there with an exhibit along with other renewable energy providers and others, and that's done by the Sustainable Energy Research Group. So mark your calendar. If you're a town anywhere, well, any town, anyone can come. That will be something that we'll have actually some more of our components of our eco-hydro system there to demonstrate. And I wanted to get back to what you had asked us to look at, George, a number of weeks ago, which was where and how in Brattleboro could we produce sustainable, low-cost energy with microhydro? How could we do something that would be visible and economical and really important to
Yes.
show how this could work. And I'm happy to say that we have actually had conversations we have identified within, I believe, the city limits, such as, there's actually city limits, right?
Town limits.
Well, bigger
Brattleboro's
than
a-
the town. There must be village limits then, right? Of the
Well, the town goes out to past the center of West Brattleboro.
Yeah. No, I
So
know that. I'm talking about right here in sort of urban Brattleboro.
Urban downtown
Downtown.
Downtown Brattleboro.
The areas where people are not allowed to walk around nude.
Right. Okay.
Well defined.
Well, anyway, we've found a wonderful microhydro site that potentially could produce lots of clean, low-cost power for a small business in Brattleboro. We may actually be speaking with them today.
Oh, good.
And it's the type of thing that this could be paying this business back hundreds of dollars a month from day one. And actually contributing to building a local renewable energy product. So we're very excited about that, and thanks to you for suggesting that.
By the way, I do not get a commission. But by hundreds of dollars a month, you're talking about over and above any cost of putting this in.
I'm talking about the cost of their power today. For example, if they were a small business and using $1,000 a month of their GMP bill, this system could be producing enough, possibly even to obviate that entire bill day one.
Right.
But it's almost guaranteed from the natural resource, and Jeff will get into what that is. From the natural resource perspective, looking at this site, and I will say it's mostly gravity, not water, but it's mostly gravity we use in our system. And as far as I know, we're not running out of it. So if this site can harness this amazing amount of hydraulic head, they could easily turn off half of their GMP bill in the first month. So that would be a payback to them. And the way you calculate the rate, the kilowatt hour, and that's kilowatts are great, but what we actually use and what we buy and what your bill has on it is something called a kilowatt hour, which is 1,000 watts for 1 hour. And the all-in cost by the time you have generation and transmission and distribution and all other kinds of adder costs around here is somewhere in the 17 to 20 cents per kilowatt hour range.
I'm paying 19 cents.
19, yeah.
Well, I'm getting cow power.
Okay, right. Well, regardless, some places are more, some places are less. So in this particular site, I think we could be generating power today at less than 10 cents a kilowatt hour. So
That includes the cost of the equipment?
Oh, yes.
Financing?
Entirely.
Okay. I
Completely.
want to say that because I know that that's what you're talking about, but I want everybody who's out there in TV land to...
The way it's calculated is very simple. It's the same way as you would for wind or solar or any renewable. What is the capital cost? What is the operational maintenance cost, which in our case, microhydro is very, very little. And you calculate over a lifespan, which we use the solar model, which is typically 20 years to 25 years, and what the payback in essence would be, and how many kilowatt hours and the capacity factor, which for microhydro is in the 90s, the 90%.
Which means it's better than nuclear.
Yeah, it's not 1,000 megawatts, but
okay. You
it
put
runs
1,000
all the time.
systems in and you've got 1,000.
And so it's highly, this particular site, we're hoping to announce something with it, with your, we'll come back here and talk about it. And then back to your question as far as the Whetstone Brook. And I think that there is potential in the Whetstone Brook. I don't know about right in the village, but certainly as you move west to Brattleboro, and there are a number of first-order brooks. By that I mean coming from water sources like springs and other that are feeding into the Whetstone, which could prove, very, very appropriate for microhydro. And again, what microhydro really wants is something called hydraulic head, water running down hills, because that's how the gravity energy is harnessed in the water to pressurize the water, and that is what produces the power. And with that, actually, I'll let Jeff, who is our general manager and really the guy who's out in the field doing the projects and making things happen. I mean, we all do everything. We're a small company. But Jeff has forgotten more about microhydro than I'll ever know in my life. He's been in Southeast Asia. He's a New Hampshire native. He was with the Peace Corps and an entity of the World Bank in Southeast Asia for several decades, doing many, many, many microhydro systems, but also what they call mini hydro and small hydro and biodigesters and solar and wind and everything renewable.
Yeah.
And we're very
He
pleased
and I
to
have
have
had some really good conversations on wood gas.
Yeah.
And it's, but
Jeff knows a lot about that, and we're really thrilled to have him coming on board our team. And with that, yeah, Jeff,
Sure.
talk about,
Thanks.
I've got the box here and
Okay.
whatever, anything you want.
Yeah, and I guess what we thought we would do is maybe just sort of walk people through the whole process of what is a water resource, a hydro resource, whatever you want to call it, and then kind of the steps that would need to go through for anyone to take a look at, or a community to take a look at a resource they had, a stream they have, and then decide whether or not it makes sense
now, I want to break in here
Sure,
for
please
just
do.
a second. Now, what's happening here is you're seeing
Close the other.
water in a stream which is tiny. And I'm sorry for all the interruptions
High-tech.
in the video. This is what's called high tech. Here is a stream. This is running through the woods, and people would not normally think of this. Is this above the area that the fish would even get into?
Yeah, this is not really a fishery, but it doesn't matter because a fish actually can transit by that intake unit.
If you could draw that back to you, it would make it more likely that it would come into focus in the camera. Okay.
Oh, is that good?
Well, you can see what it's doing up on the screen.
Okay, I got it
There
now.
you go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't quite. I'm
that's
not,
probably
There it
a
is
good
in the
position.
screen.
I'm not a
In the
Let's,
stream.
there it is. This is the intake in the stream.
Yeah, and from
That is in that's what it looks like in nature.
yeah.
So, Tom, could we go to the camera that's on this? Okay. Click.
And what do you want to do?
Just put it up so people can see it.
They can, it's on.
No, it's.
This here.
Oh,
You gotta
okay.
click that
I'm
thing.
sorry, I didn't know
That's
what you
okay.
meant.
Yeah.
I mean, this
Yeah.
one
Okay,
here.
now.
Yeah, so this is the intake.
Cleverly
Yeah.
concealing James Perkins.
no, I don't need to be seen. This is much more important.
is the intake, and that is what we saw in that stream. And James, if you could kind of rotate that a little bit, people can get a picture.
There you go.
Draw it back toward you, so that it's
Well,
we
for
know
the
it's in
camera.
focus.
There you go.
There you go. And basically, what happens is the water is flowing over that.
Yeah.
And if you kind of put your hand down where the water goes, people will see the water flows down that. Now, that area, believe it or not, if a fish came to water flowing the way we saw it in the stream,
You can see it again
over
now.
that area, and it said, "What do I do now?" It wouldn't have to think very hard because it would just put on it would start burning its interior power, and it would go right up that. That's not too steep for a fish to go
Just so
over.
you know as well, this concept was developed originally in conjunction with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in the Pacific Northwest for salmon smolt fisheries, where they were actually wanting to move fish and they had to move water around. And there's various versions of this screen that actually allows the transit without any damage at all to fish.
Okay.
So that
Now,
was the origin of it.
How big are salmon smolt that would be?
Very,
going
very
on this?
small.
What does that mean?
It's like a
quarter
I
of an
don't-
inch long?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay,
right.
so in the greenhouse at where I live, we have fish tanks, and the fish breed in there. These are mostly goldfish, but we've had other fish breeding too. And when those little fish are that size, they look kind of like an eyelash with eyeballs on it. They're really, really small.
Right.
Really, really small. And this thing here will allow those fish to go down over it. I imagine
And
they're
back up.
probably and back up.
Well, when they're
there's
that
enough
small,
flow,
they
yeah.
probably aren't going
Yeah.
to. But as when they want to go up, when they're larger, they can.
They can go up. And this thing will allow that to happen without damaging those fish. So the fish are basically impervious to what's going on here. This is non-invasive technology.
And there's an additional benefit to this particular design of intake. You have the screen here, which keeps out the trash and other stuff from getting into the water that's taken for the hydro, as well as allowing the fish and such to flow over it because of the way it's designed and the particular effect it has. But this also has sort of an automatic bypass feature. So once you determine in a stream course what the minimum amount of flow that course needs to maintain its health, the health of the course, these units are designed to allow from here that minimum amount of water to always flow through. First priority to the stream, second priority goes to the hydro. So if water levels drop for some reason, the hydro system will be starved for water before the stream is starved for water.
Right.
And so there's never a case of the hydropower pulling off more water than the stream can safely operate at.
So the owner has the opportunity to make that selection.
Well, no, this machine, it's designed in and it's automatic. And that's the beauty of this. There's no moving parts. There's no on-off switch. It just happens naturally. And that's why this is a very, very clever design, both in terms of the intake, but also in the minimum bypass. And it sort of mitigates the concerns people might have that you're going to impact my stream or my neighbor's stream by pulling too much water. Once you're permitted with this, you can't. You have the minimum always available.
Now, this will run in the winter.
Oh, yes. We'll show you some photos.
What are the
of
minimum temperatures?
35 below zero. There's a video of it running.
35 below zero is a little colder than I'm accustomed to.
Yeah, well, it's under the ice and the snow.
It happens once in a while.
It's a typical one.
Yeah.
But I wanted to just mention with Tom, your point about you decide the water, the bypass flow. That's actually an area of regulation that we're trying to improve. There was a bill introduced into the Vermont House by Representative Margaret Cheney of Norwich, which would have helped us quite a bit in determination of that minimum flow. And unfortunately right now, that's not an easy number for us to attain. We're working with ANR, but it is a regulated aspect. And it needs to be made straightforward because the health of the stream is something that we would consider to be a #1 priority.
Okay, which one is
Now, there are streams that
winter operation?
do not require permitting.
No, that's not true.
Well, they don't require the $50,000 permitting.
No, that's not related to the stream. That's related to connecting the microhydro system to net meter on the grid.
Okay.
That would be a FERC proceeding. There are two areas of regulation. One, I put this in front of which camera should I have it here? I guess that's good. I'll just sit behind it.
Yeah.
The water course side, which is what we're talking about here.
Right.
And then the grid
This is
side,
slideshow.
which is the $50,000 part of it.
Okay.
And so what
That's
we
automatic.
do is we don't
it just
connect to the
goes
grid
through.
because of that.
You guys might want to put your hand over your mics while you chat.
Oh, okay.
They've got a conversation going on in the
Understand.
background.
Yeah.
But the intermittent streams don't require as much in the way of permitting as...
Intermittent streams do not support fisheries, and therefore there's no bypass flow issues at all. We still would size this to be environmentally sustainable. We're not going to put in a system that is not highly environmentally sustainable and doesn't damage what is called the macroinvertebrate life and the riverine environment. We want the water course to remain in its natural state, supporting whatever the life that's there before the microhydro system was in, and you can come see our systems where they've been installed. When we have had permitting difficulties, every single one of them, but every one of them, if you look at the water course, it's very healthy.
Now, the permitting difficulties could be reduced greatly by this legislation that
Yes.
Margaret Cheney
That's correct.
introduced.
Yeah.
And that legislation never made it to the House floor.
Correct.
So you're hoping that that's going to happen in the next
Yeah, we're certainly hoping. There's been a lot of support from citizens and some support in the legislature, both the House and the Senate, and I would anticipate that that would be reintroduced for the next session. But we'd certainly like to. We'd like to be out talking about it before then. We never would have dreamed that in environmentally progressive Vermont that a low-cost, highly environmentally sustainable technology like microhydro, when a bill would be introduced, that Otherwise, progressive legislators would, frankly, kill it.
Yeah.
And it's very disappointing.
Yeah.
So, we know that that this is it's the right thing, and it's just going to take time.
Well, yeah, and I think what we have to do is keep the conversation going.
Absolutely.
In the meantime. This is not the only microhydro technology.
No, it's not.
There are technologies that can be done on very low heads. So there are other ways that people could benefit from that legislation. So it's not just you that the legislation would be benefiting.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it. The way the regulatory world is looked at hydro is that it's all like the Hoover Dam. It's all big and needs very heavy regulation to prevent
or the
environmental
Vernon Dam.
Yeah, or whatever. Pick any local dam you don't like. But, so to prevent sort of that happening without some sort of regulatory control. And unfortunately, the larger businesses and various other groups, for reasons, environmental groups and such, always consider hydro to be larger systems, impounding of rivers and things like that. And microhydro, because it has no natural, powerful business constituent, keeps getting pushed aside and ignored for the most part. But it's really unfair to compare microhydro of this scale with the Vernon Dam or any other dam around, because it's a totally different thing. It needs a different set of rules. And that's really what we're saying, is that if you're going to approach this and you're going to make it work, because it's a regulatory issue, not a technology issue, it's not a finance issue, then it needs to be considered in a new light as something that, yes, it is hydro, yes, it is making power from water, but it's a different approach at a different scale with completely different impacts. And so what we have is a product for what we call high head. So when you have a very large drop of the water from a high point to a low point that you can capture in a pipe from our intake down to a turbine. But there are medium head ones and there are low head ones. And sort of the trade-off is, if you have very high head, you need a little bit of water. If you have low head, you need a larger volume of water. And that's an easy way for people to look at their resource. If you have, a 1-2 yard drop, but a really tiny stream, you might maybe run, your door light. But if you
over
have
a distance, it's not a waterfall like Hawaii. It can be over a distance.
you can move that water over distance,
Right,
but
right,
ultimately you're looking at the drop that you create
So-
in that
So what you're
system.
showing us here is a very small head unit.
This is actually it's a high head.
This is a
unit.
high head. This
These
is
are
the-
high head.
Yeah.
This is the intake for
Can we do
something
the
where a pipe
slideshow?
goes a
Oh,
long
Oh, okay.
ways.
So from where you're intaking
Yeah.
to where you're generating the power is a good distance
Elevation
away.
differential,
Yeah, yeah.
and it
Okay.
could be, we say we'd like to see 150 feet of elevation difference in less than 2,000 feet distance. So 2,000 feet is a
Okay.
long way. And the advantage of this, as Jeff pointed out, is that with high head, we use very low flow, very little
Very
water.
little water.
Therefore, the environmental impact is de minimis. On low head, the environmental impact can be substantial. And that's one of the challenges in low head, is that you need a lot of water.
Yes.
And that you have to have a lot of water to begin with. And there are environmental impacts, and it's more expensive. That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
It's very viable in many situations. And Jeff is right. The regulatory environment could be more supportive for all sorts of small and micro hydro.
Right.
Our particular type is the most environmentally sustainable.
Okay. Now, I have a question, which is, you said, did you say 150 feet?
150 feet of drop,
Of
elevation
drop.
differential
Right.
between a high point and a low point
Right.
on a water course within about 2,000 feet of
And
distance.
how much, if you had that, if you had just those circumstances that you just described, how much power would you generate and how much water would it use?
Sure. You could easily run, and we're running, if you go to our website, littlegreenhydro.com, you'll see 400 head of dairy cattle that their heifer operation is entirely powered, the lights and the fans, by the microhydro system.
Do you know how much power
It's
is?
about 20 kilowatt hours a day.
20. So this is something that would be not outside the realm of having that amount applied to a house.
You could easily run a normal house. It doesn't have to be highly energy efficient. It's not going to run a lot of electric heating and other things, but you shouldn't be doing that anyway. I'll shut up after this. To put it in equivalence, that system will produce the same kilowatt hours, not kilowatts, kilowatt
Kilowatt
hours, as a 5 kilowatt solar array.
Which is a big solar
That's a
array.
big solar array.
And how much water would that use?
Maybe 40, 35 gallons a minute.
Okay.
And most conventional or low hydro would use thousands of gallons per minute.
Yes. Yeah. I'm
that's-
thinking in
that's the
terms of a
penstock
house
pipe.
I used to live in.
Sure.
Which
the
had a,
penstock.
had
Okay.
a spring that was a couple
Springs can work, but they have to be
1,500 feet away.
really big.
This was a big spring, but it wouldn't have produced that much water.
30 gallons a minute is about a 2-inch pipe running full,
Okay.
something like that.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe 1.5 inches.
Yeah.
And again, it depends on the head behind it.
Yeah.
Just to give you a size of perspective, we're usually using a 3 to 4 inch penstock pipe, and
Okay.
we don't want it anywhere near full.
Yeah. Okay.
We can show you
All right.
this thing in action now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
there's good. Show that.
That's the
Go ahead,
pipe.
Jeff.
So that's the penstock pipe from the screen we showed earlier. It's buried underground to keep it from freezing. It's just plastic pipe available locally, and it's that's the size, the volume of water that you bring down the hill.
So
And
this
this
is
was
just standard plastic pipe you pick
It's,
up
it's
in a
municipal
hardware
water
Municipal
pumping,
water pumping,
and that
yeah.
is we normally don't do it that deep or big. Let me just tell you that when we do it with farms, most of the farmers have backhoes,
Yeah.
and they go out and use them, and that's what he did.
They're
And That's
fun.
why it was
Yeah,
a big,
exactly. That's why you use it.
it was a big trench, but normally we'd use a ditch witch because it doesn't have to be buried
Yeah,
very
yeah.
deep.
And this is the picture is the penstock buried, so it's underground, and
It's
you
gone
won't-
already.
It's gone, so you won't have issues with that. It won't interrupt your land use or
You don't worry about a cow stepping.
you don't
on it.
worry about cows or
Or
kids
moose.
going over it with their bikes or anything like that. Yeah, and this is just the power line. Goes back up through a trench to the
Back
barn.
to the barn.
Back to the barn where
You
this
got
guy's
it.
using it. Yep. And
there's
there you
the
go. See
barn.
the trench and the barn in the background to run the power up.
So this is pretty far away from the house.
About
This is-
900
this
feet.
Is beautiful. Look at
Yeah.
this.
And this is the actual turbine. So that white pipe we showed out of the intake coming down the hill comes in here to that big brass valve and then is sent into the turbine, which is a small gray cylinder at the very top of the screen.
Now, that valve is designed for a human being of ordinary proportions to put his hand around it
Yep.
and turn.
Yep.
So this will give you an idea of how massive this turbine
And the serious impact that results from putting them in.
We'll show the picture of the guys putting it in.
Yeah.
I mean,
So you can see it's a pretty small thing, and
it's about
there was
3
a
feet
picture of this
by
under.
less than 4.
It's in a box. There you go. There's the box.
That's it. That's a whole power unit.
And there's
that-
some
you can,
feet.
There's
You
some
can see how
feet
big
and
it
a
is.
hand on
Yeah.
it. Yeah, isn't
and
that
then
beautiful?
that just goes in and is covered up, and it runs you around.
Now, I noticed that there's insulation in that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that insulation is one of the reasons why when I heard a recording of one of these things earlier, it sounded like it was about as loud
Quiet.
as an electric
There's the
electric
35
razor.
below zero.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
there it is. And that's what you get with one of these somewhere in the woods near your house or near your stream. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're pretty innocuous
They're
in a
pretty
lot of ways.
innocuous.
And there's not much damage that can be done to that unless on purpose. So it's a pretty bulletproof, robust system.
Not
that we're talking-
literally bulletproof.
No.
Well,
But
that one might be.
figuratively, yeah.
Figuratively
yeah,
bulletproof.
yeah.
Although
So-
in the position that it's in, it's not likely to be
Yeah.
damaged.
And then the power is just taken out of there by a cable and run up to the control box. It's pretty straightforward.
How
And
big is the cable?
I'm not
It
sure what the
depends
wiring-
on the exact installation, but typically we're using 2/0 aluminum service cable. And it's,
2/0,
yeah, and
okay.
it's DC. That's a very expensive cable. And there you go. There's a turbine actually spinning. That's great, Jeff.
This would be what you'd be likely to see coming into your house from the utility.
Well, what we have is Jeff said a control box, but it's more than that. We have a panel. There's a photo somewhere. Too bad we can't get the sound because there's water here too. We have a panel that mounts next to your service panel, and it comes into our electronics, which actually has monitoring software and other things too. And then the power just goes right into your service panel and your circuit breaker, just like it's a generator. You think of it as a renewable energy generator. It's running all the time. And there you go. Sorry.
I was going to say, I don't have to think of it that way. That's what it is. It's a lovely system.
Well, there are people that have grid problems and are thinking about generators. And this could be a very cost-effective backup generator, or really, you could use your grid as the backup and use this all the time and have energy independence economically
Right.
and stability.
Right.
And you're not generating carbon emissions, and no one can take it away from you.
Except the bank.
For a few years.
And that would be for a completely different reason.
Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that fun? Okay, you know, it happens that we're coming right to the end of our program right now.
Boy, that was good planning.
Yeah, it was.
Good job, George.
I think you were the one who did it. Okay, are we going to continue after this?
Well, the main camera that we usually look at, that usually looks at us, isn't working for some reason. That's this camera right here.
All right,
It
I
just
think-
suddenly stopped working, and I can't do
think what
anything
we're
about
going
it
to
from
do
here.
is we're going to say goodbye to those people who are watching on the cablecast, and I will say we will have another show next week. But for those who are doing this on a webcast, we may go on. We just haven't made up our minds what we're doing yet.
We just can't be seen. The camera that's looking at us is dead. I can look at you.
Minor problem.
Radio.
No, look here, Tom. You can click on the one that has James and
Yeah,
Jeff
I
on
can
it.
click on those
So they
guys.
can be
They can be on it.
All right, and I can be on it.
I just can't be on it.
Well, do you mind? We could just keep talking if James and Jeff
I'll just
will.
say boo-hoo once in a while.
Oh,
and,
okay. All right.
Yeah,
Or
we
you
can do
could, I
that.
could scoot over, and you could scoot over to be with me.
Yeah, we can
Here.
work something out.
There you go.
You know, we really covered an awful lot of territory, really very concisely, I think.
Okay, good.
What I'd really love to do is come back and talk about a real project here in Brattleboro.
I think that would be wonderful.
You know,
I hope
we hope to go meet with these folks today after this, shortly.
Yeah. Let me know how that goes.
You bet.
I think we're done for the day then.
Unless these people want to talk for a little while.
We could talk for another 25 minutes
It doesn't matter because
Okay.
they'll just cut it all off and, you know.
for the broadcast. Thing.
Yeah,
I was hoping for another hour so we could have a little green hydro.
You know, running
show.
things off hydro in Brattleboro isn't new.
No.
No.
We have a local citizen journalism site called Live Brattleboro, and they have a feature where the guy that operates the site throws in stuff from the past, you know, historical. And he put one up about 2 weeks ago where they talked about the street railroad, the trolley car,
Yeah.
that unfortunately doesn't exist anymore. But this particular winter, they ran it on hydro, and it showed how much money they saved.
Even downstairs in the police museum, there's a hydro. That's
It's
in one of
probably the
exhibits.
same
Oh,
hydro.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's really our shame, Rick, here in New England, that we had so much hydropower already. I mean, some of the first electric generating stations in the nation
We're here.
were built here in New England. I mean, my house in Pennacook was powered off of one of them. You know, and they were all hydropower. But when oil and coal came in, it was just so cheap. That, well, just go to the new thing and,
That's what it
let
was.
it let
It
it
was
flounder.
cheap
And
and,
unfortunately,
cheap and
we've
easy.
lost our manufacturing ability to do these things.
There's an opportunity there for somebody.
Oh, there's a big opportunity.
I knew a guy, met a guy, I didn't really know him, but he bought a hydro dam
Oh, yeah.
in New Hampshire, and he bought it for
Nothing. Right.
nothing.
Right.
And he said he could put in 3 turbines, but he could only afford 1. So he put in the 1 turbine, and it was enough to support his family.
Do you recall where this is?
Yeah, it's just across the river.
Oh, really?
But there's stories like that of all around people finding old sites and sort of fixing them up, bringing them back, and whatever
Yeah.
they can afford, putting that in and running it, and as they build up.
But every one of those guys, and I've talked to a lot of them, will tell you
Oh, yeah. Yep.
the government regulation for this is, you know, off the charts, and literally they can't afford to move ahead on some of it because of the regulatory
Can't do the paperwork.
requirements. And, you know, there is an appropriate place for it, but we're not talking the Vernon Dam on these things.
Well, the Vernon
and it could
Dam
be
and
done
that-
responsibly,
Yeah.
and this needs to be rational.
Yeah. But the systems that we were putting in when the Vernon Dam was built were systems that did not take the environment into account
course,
all that much.
of course.
And you know, when I was a little kid, I spent years living in Illinois, and I lived on the Fox River, which is just a little ways west of Chicago. And we had a dam in our town, and the dam generated a small amount of electricity, but the people in the town took great pride in the fact that it actually had a fish ladder.
Sure.
And that, I hadn't thought about that until recently. But fish ladders in 1955 and that period
Pretty new.
Yeah, it's
were
forward-thinking.
very unusual.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
They were very unusual.
But the hydro opportunities are very broad, from smaller stuff like we're doing micro, which people debate, but up to about 100 kilowatts, and then mini from 100 up to a megawatt. There's just vast opportunities. But again, as James pointed out, and we were told last weekend by one of the state reps from New Hampshire who has a friend who has a hydro 200 kilowatt station, a pile of papers this big to get through the regulatory thing. And if you're a small operator, how are you going to deal with that?
That's
The
not gonna
cost
work.
is beyond the cost of your turbine. So it just stifles, basically it stifles
Right.
the industry.
And what they have been doing in the political sector has been trying to enable solar.
Yep.
Right.
Because that is something that anybody can
Quick and
do.
easy.
It's
yeah.
easy.
Quick and easy, yeah.
You know, there
But-
are no immediate environmental
But if
impacts
they
other
had
than
a
aesthetic.
if they had a way to enable microhydro.
Yeah.
Now microhydro goes to 100 kilowatts.
Yeah, that's the definition I've always
All right,
used.
100
yeah.
kilowatts.
That's what Wikipedia says, whether you believe that or not, but that's de facto standard.
Wikipedia is a really great resource for things that you can't find.
You couldn't find it elsewhere.
Yeah.
elsewhere, but which means
Or you
that
want to make up.
sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong.
Yes.
And if you want, yeah, but the 100 kilowatts, if you're generating at full power, is 100 kilowatt hours
That's a very large.
Every
per
hour, yeah.
And 100 kilowatt hours is going to be about, in terms of, it's going to range. It's going to be all over the map in terms of wholesale power. But we could figure it being about, what,
To generate it, to
the amount of money that it would make if you were
Oh, I
putting it on
can't
the
tell you.
grid.
It depends. The power purchase agreements can be anything from a penny to
Negative.
30. Yeah, exactly. Right now, you can't.
All right, but if it was, say, 7
How
cents.
about talking about how many houses or businesses or town buildings could be provided
Right.
with that power? A 100 kilowatt microhydro system could run, I don't know specifically the kilowatt hour usage, but I can tell you it would run an awful lot of the buildings in the town of Brattleboro.
It would run about 100 houses, wouldn't it?
I would think if they were energy efficient houses, not
Okay.
not ranch houses with electric heating and electric
That's just
ranges and electric
Right.
and this and electric
But
that. No.
this is a
Solar
respectable
houses,
amount.
you bet. It would
Yeah,
run
100
200
kilowatts
of
is a
those.
good amount of power.
What I was
yeah,
thinking
yeah.
was if we're selling electricity, just selling electricity at 7 cents per kilowatt hour, that would be $7 an hour that you're getting 24 hours a day.
24 hours a day, yeah.
So this is a respectable amount of money
Right.
that it might be good enough for, if the permitting allowed it, for a group of people to put together a community microhydro system in exactly the same way that the solar farms are being done.
There'd be no question that would happen. The issue really is that in order to do this all above board, the regulation imposed by FERC and others is so onerous on these small businesses that it's impossible to do, and therefore no one will do it. But if you go to other countries that don't have that sort of regulatory burden for microhydro, it is being done by groups of people.
Right.
In some places where they have a longer history of it, like Nepal, for all its other problems, everybody and their brother are lending money for microhydro. You have these community lending groups now fighting over hydro projects because they're such good investments, because they don't have that additional twice the cost for the paperwork that we have imposed here. So yeah, if you were able to make a level playing field for net metering of solar or mini
way of
wind
saying level
and micro hydro, then you would see an explosion in
Right.
terms of the
Well-
numbers, but also this is where it amazes me, the jobs that come from these. Good jobs in sort of installation and operation, good jobs in design and construction. These are all STEM type things that we should be promoting and doing, but we're not, because we've got this FERC regulation that stifles the entire industry. It's a shame, actually.
Well, you know, one of the things that I'm kind of gearing up to push for is for every community in Vermont to try to produce its own power. And not 100% of the power
Right,
that
but
it
some
uses,
percent,
but
that's great.
Whatever you
some
can, yeah.
percentage. And determine on its own, or in conjunction with the next community over, or whatever, whether it's going to do that and in what way. And of course, many communities could get a lot of power out of biomass. And there are many ways to get biomass power, as you know. I was surprised, you know, if you just take wind power, I can tell you 3 different ways to get wind power, you know, using different turbines. And you've got horizontal axis and vertical axis, and airborne now is starting to form up.
I've got a neat picture of there.
Airborne.
I'll show it to you
I
next week.
helped the
It's-
group a little bit on their kite system. It's
a
pretty
kite.
neat. Yeah, it's expensive power. The controls need to be automated, but it's a really neat approach. It's a really neat approach.
But
yeah.
the wind power potential way up in the
Yeah,
air
that's
is
fabulous.
enormous,
Yeah,
and
Well,
it's
they-
almost constant.
That did I put in an article this week about that girl in I think it was the University of Delaware, who was talking about the potential of wind power in low level jet streams.
No.
I
you
didn't put that in.
Yeah, bring it up, put it in
I've got
next week.
I've got to put it in. She was a researcher who figured out that there's the amount of power in low-level jet streams that would be accessible to tethered wind power things that you can identify. She said she started doing the research on this and was amazed to discover that these very constant wind resources are available in over about a quarter of the Earth. And you can put these elevated things up there that might be like blimps, like the one that you had a picture of.
That was a blimp.
It was
The one,
a blimp
yeah.
that had a cylinder in the middle through which the wind would
Sure.
blow.
Yeah.
The one picture I have, or it's several pictures, and I'll bring them up next week. It looks like a little airplane. Not a little. It looks like a big airplane.
Big one,
Yeah.
And it is in fact a kite, but it looks like an airplane with 4 engines.
But these things
It's
are
a
not
kite
that high.
with 4 generators.
They're not
4
that
turbines
high.
on it.
They're tethered.
Yeah.
And they're maybe a couple thousand feet up. And
What this one doesn't show you how
Yeah,
high up it is.
And there's another approach where they have a kite that's tethered to a generator on the ground. And what they do is they'll run that kite up and they'll fly it in a figure 8 pattern. And what they'll do is
gosh.
they'll pull it down with electricity or a flywheel. And then on the way up, it's generating power. So you have this program where you can program it where it's just always up there running this figure 8, being pulled down by a flywheel or excess power, and then generating more power on the up that you then start putting power into a local grid or batteries
like
or whatever.
pumped
So you don't
storage,
have
but different.
Yeah, but you don't have turbines in the air. You just have a big kite, gigantic kite, and somebody's there with a control stick or automated. So it's new. There's a lot of issues and flight issues. So, you have this thing up there. You're going to have to change flight patterns, things like that. But yeah, there's a lot out there.
There's so many things going on right now. It's hard to keep up
it's
with.
really crazy.
But that's all technology development. Hydro is there.
We're here.
and
Hydro
it's
is
old.
there.
You know,
Economically
we're
viable.
stumbling over old dams
Yeah.
because we can't refurbish them.
Well, it goes what back 4,000 years?
Yeah, more than
There's
that,
nothing
yeah.
we have to
Yeah,
invent.
yeah.
It's
I
all
mean,
there.
In the Himalayas, they say they were building water grist mills 10,000 years ago.
10,000
And
years ago.
I've been up in sites that are thousands of years old. The site, not the building.
The thing that really surprised me was tidal power. The first tidal power sites were done in Ireland during the Middle Ages. It's like all of this technology
new.
that we talk about today as though it was
I
the
got some
latest
pictures
thing.
of that too.
Have you?
That's incredible. Yeah, not 600 years ago, but
So
some
can
of
we
the tidal
take
power.
this?
Some of the tidal power sites.
Okay.
Are we done?
I don't know. I was just going to say, are we on or done or what?
I believe we're being recorded. Whether this is actually
We're being recorded, so we
this
can
is
do
going
what
to
we
go
want
on
to
the
do.
on the cablecast
Okay.
thing, which
Okay.
will be the back end of the same show.
It will be edited.
Yeah.
Can we
think
see can you sometimes send us a link or something to that or whatever?
Oh,
I don't
sure.
know
Yeah,
how to get
absolutely. Yeah,
to see that.
absolutely.
I watched the last one. It was
Okay.
fun, yeah.
Because I'd like to be able to, in something like that, when we have the main camera, and when we have the technology that we can put it on a laptop to show lots of things like project plans and details.
I think that would be excellent.
Like, here's a
It
real
would-
site, and
when
here's
you
what we wanna
if
do.
you
That's
if
what
you
we can
can
do.
get a local plan going
Right.
with a local organization,
Yeah.
that would be really a stunning
Yeah, that's what I'd love to do. So
thing. It would be fun.
anybody out there, we talked, well, actually last week there was the New Hampshire Local Energy Solutions annual meeting, and I know it's not an annual meeting, it's like a trade show, but there was probably, 500 people at least?
Good
a
number,
lot of
yeah.
town energy committees. There was actually a great group from Brattleboro High School that was there and had a
Yes.
booth near us.
Yes.
Isn't that interesting?
Their
And
new movie. It's cool.
A little
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah.
And, so we put the bug in their ear that, hey, we want to do something in Brattleboro, and let's figure out how to do it. They were great guys, yeah. Mike, I think was his name.
The teacher.
The teacher, yes.
Yeah.
He's
and
been
then he
working
had a couple of students that were wonderful.
Yeah, he's been working on a project called Project Atlantic, and I'm not sure if that was.
That's what they
They
showcased.
were
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
That was, believe it or not, I take less
Credit for
pride
it.
in this than I might, but that was the result of a proposition that I brought up before
Nice.
before the town meeting 2 years ago.
Uh-huh.
And I just said I think we should have a subcommittee of the Energy Committee told to do this. And so they formed an energy subcommittee, and there it went. And they've been investigating, basically investigating what's going on in Europe was what they were told to do. But it's become something which I think the kids in the high school have, there's a lot of information there. And I think the number of people who are that age, you know, if you think about global warming and things like that, these kids have got their lives invested in what we do about global warming.
Well, if they're looking at Europe, they're going to find lots of small and micro hydro. There's a headline every day that crosses my inbox about some new small hydro and micro hydro project, especially in Scotland, England, Ireland, Scandinavian countries, but certainly also Central and Southern Europe. And they're way more, I don't know what the number is today, but I know that 10 years ago, it was almost 20% of EU power was from hydro of all kinds, and most of their hydro is small hydro. And our power was about 7% hydro, and 90% of ours is, you know, Hoover Dam hydro.
Yeah.
And that's what we learned to do very well, is low cost, industrial scale, you know, damn the torpedoes, and we're going to do it.
Yeah.
But the impacts, you know, in 1915, they didn't think about those things.
Well, in 1915, they had an entirely different economic system.
Of course.
They had a country that was, by the standards we've got today, really underpopulated. Nobody aside from Teddy Roosevelt cared about the environment.
Right.
And it was just an entirely different thing.
Yeah, mindset was different. Yeah.
Mindset was different. When I was a kid, I remember looking out over the town of Northfield, Massachusetts, from where and Bernardston, from where I lived, which is on a mountaintop, and seeing smoke coming up from a concrete plant, and saying, "I wish that wasn't in our view." And my Aunt Ruth saying, "George, that's you know, that's
So
the
it keeps the buildings,
that's
the
that's
town
sign of
progress,
progress,
right,
yeah.
you know, it's the
economics.
smell of progress is
Right.
what they used to talk about.
Smell of progress. Right.
And
Paper mills, too.
paper mills too, yeah. If your water wasn't polluted, then you weren't
Something wrong
running
with
your
you.
economy right. You know.
Well, it's been a lot of fun being with you guys, and
Well-
hope sometime in the not too distant future we'll
Let us
do
know,
something.
I think
because-
when we find a good project, we can sort of document it nice and crisp and show that to people, to show that there's a lot of opportunities.
Well, you know,
and get people thinking.
if you
because
are
there's an awful
doing
lot of
something
sites.
in Brattleboro, BCTV, which is running this, would allow us to take cameras into the field.
That'd be
And
cool.
we could
Well, there
just
you
do
go.
it, and we could actually,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
could make a TV show out of it and have a.
We'll
have
shoot
You can make a
for
whole
that.
show out of it.
out
shoot
of
for
it,
that.
yeah,
Cool.
documentary and
Get the
you know.
kids involved.
Yeah.
They did some nice films.
Yeah.
His
Yeah, they know what they're doing.
students there. No,
Yeah.
I saw it. It looked professional.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you all the people who have watched to the end of this one, and we hope to be able to get you another show on microhydro, which is going to be more fun yet. So, there you go.